Jack Bennett rode his horse slowly through the pine forest. The autumn air was cool on his face. He had been tracking a deer since sunrise. His cabin needed meat for the coming winter. 5 years after the war, Jack still preferred the quiet of the woods to the noise of town. The former Union soldier adjusted his worn hat and dismounted. He tied his horse, an aging chestnut mare named Penny, to a low branch. Something had spooked the deer. Jack crouched and studied the ground. The track showed the deer had run east away from the river. That was strange. The river was safety for most animals. Jack moved carefully through the trees. He listened for any sound that didn't belong in the forest. His time in the war had taught him to notice small things. These skills kept him alive then, and they helped him live alone now. The voices came to him on the wind, men talking and laughing. Jack frowned. He was far from the trails most travelers used. He moved closer, staying hidden behind trees and brush. As he neared a small clearing, he saw them. 5 men, dirty and armed, sat around a small fire. Their horses were tied nearby. Jack knew trouble when he saw it. These weren't hunters or trappers. The guns they carried and the way they watched the trees told Jack they were outlaws. He was about to back away when he saw her. A young woman sat with her hands tied behind her back. She wore the dress of the Comanche people. Her long black hair was tangled and her face showed a mix of anger and fear. A bruise darkened one cheek. "Quinn ain't gonna wait forever," one of the men said. He was tall and thin with a scar across his chin. "That Comanche chief will pay plenty to get his daughter back." Another man spit into the fire. "Or we sell her to them Mexicans heading south. They pay good for women, no questions asked." Jack felt his stomach turn. He had seen enough evil during the war. He knew he should leave, ride to town, and tell Marshal Porter. But the town of Redemption Creek was a full day's ride away. By then the girl might be gone. The men talked about their plans. The leader was someone named Silas Quinn. They planned to send a message to the Comanche chief, demanding payment for his daughter. Jack learned the girl was named Morning Fawn, daughter of Chief Running Bear. Jack watched until the sun began to set. 2 of the men left to hunt for dinner. Another fell asleep against a tree. The remaining 2 sat near the fire, playing cards. The Comanche girl sat still, watching everything with dark, angry eyes. Jack knew he had one chance. He moved back through the woods to where Penny waited. From his saddlebag, he took a small tin container. Inside was a mixture of herbs and powders he had traded for from a medicine man of the Cherokee tribe. Jack had used it once to drive away a mountain lion that had been stalking him. He returned to the edge of the clearing. The 2 men were arguing over their card game now. Jack took out his hunting knife and cut a strip from his bandana. He opened the tin and sprinkled the mixture onto the cloth. Then he crept around to the side where the horses were tied. Jack waited until both men looked down at their cards. Then he lit the cloth with a match and tossed it near the horses. The mixture began to smoke and give off a sharp, strange smell. The horses snorted and pulled at their ropes. Then one reared up and broke free. The others followed, panicking at the smell. "The horses," one man yelled, jumping up. Both men ran after the animals, shouting. The 3rd man woke up and joined the chase. Jack moved quickly into the clearing. The Comanche girl's eyes widened when she saw him. He put a finger to his lips, then knelt behind her and cut her ropes. "Come," he whispered. "I'll help you." She rubbed her wrists but didn't move. Her eyes showed she didn't trust him. "Your father," Jack said, hoping she understood some English. "Running Bear. I'll help you get back to him." The shouts of the men chasing the horses grew more distant. "They didn't have much time, please," Jack said. He held out his hand. Morning Fawn looked at the forest where the men had gone, then back at Jack. She nodded once and took his hand. They ran through the trees back to where Penny waited. Jack helped Morning Fawn onto the horse, then climbed up, behind her. He turned Penny away from the clearing and urged her into a trot. They had gone maybe a mile when Jack heard a shout behind them. He looked back and saw one of the men at the edge of the trees. The man raised his rifle. "Down!" Jack yelled, pulling Morning Fawn low against the horse's neck. The rifle cracked and bark exploded from a tree near them. Jack kicked Penny into a gallop. They rode hard for an hour, taking paths only a local would know. When Jack was sure they weren't being followed, he slowed Penny to a walk. The horse was breathing hard and he didn't want to hurt her. "We'll go to my cabin," he told Morning Fawn, not sure how much she understood. "Rest there, then I can take you to your people." The sun had set by the time they reached Jack's cabin. It was a small, sturdy building set against a hillside. A creek ran nearby and a small barn stood to one side. Jack helped Morning Fawn down from the horse. In the fading light, he could see she was limping. "You're hurt," he said. She said something, in Comanche, that he didn't understand. When she took a step, she winced. Jack led her into the cabin and lit a lamp. The single room was simple but clean. A bed stood in one corner, a table and 2 chairs in another. A stone fireplace took up most of one wall. "Sit," Jack said, pointing to a chair. He built a fire in the fireplace, then filled a pot with water from a bucket and hung it over the flames to heat. When the water was warm, Jack found a clean cloth. He knelt by Morning Fawn and pointed to her ankle. She hesitated, then extended her foot. Jack carefully removed her moccasin. Her ankle was swollen and bruised. "Bad men do this?" he asked. She nodded. "When I fight," she said in broken English. Jack cleaned the injury and wrapped it in a bandage. "You need rest," he said. He pointed to the bed. "Sleep there. I'll watch outside." Morning Fawn looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something, in her language. The tone sounded like thanks. Jack took extra blankets and went outside to sleep in the barn. He doubted the Outlaws would find his cabin tonight, but he didn't want to take chances. As he settled in the hay, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. The Comanche were not always friendly with settlers, and those outlaws wouldn't give up easily. But when he thought of what those men planned to do with Morning Fawn, he knew he had made the right choice. Jack closed his eyes, his hand resting on his rifle beside him. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles. For now, they were safe. Jack woke at first light. He checked on Penny in the barn, then walked to the cabin. When he opened the door, Morning Fawn was already awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, her dark eyes watching him carefully. "Morning," Jack said. "How is your foot?" Morning Fawn pointed to her ankle. "Better," she said. She stood up slowly and took a few steps. She still limped, but not as badly as the night before. Jack nodded. "Good. Are you hungry?" He moved to the small shelf where he kept his food and took down some dried meat and a few potatoes. While Jack made a simple breakfast, Morning Fawn looked around the cabin. Her eyes took in everything: the rifle hanging above the door, the stack of furs in the corner, the books on the small shelf. She touched a worn blue coat hanging on a peg. It was Jack's old Union Army coat. "You fight?" she asked, pointing to the coat. Jack nodded as he put a plate of food on the table. "Long time ago. War over now." He gestured for her to sit and eat. They ate in silence. Jack wondered how he would get Morning Fawn back to her people. The Comanche territory was at least 2 days' ride to the west, and those outlaws might still be looking for them. "Your tribe," Jack said when they finished eating. "Where can I find them?" Morning Fawn seemed to understand. She walked to the door and pointed west. 2 days near Big River." Jack nodded. "We'll leave tomorrow when your ankle is stronger." Morning Fawn looked at him for a long time. "Why you help me?" she asked finally. Jack wasn't sure how to answer. He thought about the war, about all the things he had seen men do to each other. "Bad men hurt people," he said simply. "I don't like bad men." Morning Fawn nodded slowly, seeming to accept this answer. Later that morning, Jack went hunting. He needed to get more meat if they were going to travel. He didn't want to leave Morning Fawn alone, but he didn't think the outlaws would find his cabin. It was well hidden in a small valley that few people knew about. "I go hunt," he told her, picking up his rifle. "You stay here. Be safe." Morning. Fawn nodded. "I wait," she said. Jack spent several hours in the woods. He shot 2 rabbits and found some late autumn berries. When he returned to the cabin in the afternoon, he found Morning Fawn sitting outside. She had found his tools and was working on something. Jack walked closer and saw she was making a new pair of moccasins from a piece of deer hide he had been saving. Her hands moved quickly, the work clearly familiar to her. "You found my things," Jack said. "Morning." Fawn looked up. "Need new shoes," she said, pointing to her torn moccasins. "I make." Jack nodded and showed her the rabbits he had caught. "For dinner," he said. While Jack cleaned the rabbits, Morning Fawn finished her moccasins. Then she helped him prepare the meal. They worked together quietly, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Jack found he liked having someone around after so many years alone. As the sun began to set, they ate rabbit stew by the fire. Jack tried to learn some Comanche words, and Morning Fawn practiced her English. It wasn't much of a conversation, but they managed to understand each other a little better. "Your name," Morning Fawn said, pointing at him. "What is?" "Jack," he said. "Jack Bennett." "Jack," she repeated, nodding. Then she pointed to herself. "Morning Fawn." Jack smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in weeks. That night, Jack again took his blankets to sleep in the barn. He wanted Morning Fawn to feel safe in the cabin. As he settled into the hay, he heard a horse approaching. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the barn door. In the moonlight, he could see a rider coming down the path to his cabin. Jack recognized him as Joe Kemp, a young man from town who sometimes brought him supplies. "Jack," Joe called out. "You there?" Jack stepped out of the barn. "Quiet down, Joe. What brings you out here so late?" Joe dismounted, looking nervous. "Marshal Porter sent me. There's trouble. Some men rode into town yesterday asking about a Comanche girl. Said she was stolen from them." Jack's grip tightened on his rifle. "What did the marshal tell them?" "Said he hadn't seen any Indians around," Joe replied. "But then Edith Montgomery started talking about how you trade with the Comanche sometimes. Those men seemed real interested in you after that." Jack cursed under his breath. Edith Montgomery, the town gossip, had never liked him. "These men," Jack said. "One of them tall, with a scar on his chin?" Joe nodded. "That's the one. Called himself Silas Quinn. Had 4 men with him. They bought drinks for everyone, asking questions about you. Marshal Porter didn't like the look of them, so he sent me to warn you." "Thanks," Jack said. "You'd better get back to town." After Joe left, Jack went to the cabin. Morning Fawn was standing by the window. She had heard everything. "Bad men come?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Not tonight. But soon maybe." He thought quickly. "We need to leave early, before sunrise." Morning Fawn understood. She picked up her new moccasins and put them on, testing them. "I ready," she said. They spent the next hour preparing. Jack packed food, ammunition, and blankets. Morning Fawn helped, moving quickly despite her injured ankle. As they worked, Jack explained his plan. They would leave before dawn and travel west, staying off the main trails. With luck, they would reach her people before Quinn and his men found them. What Jack didn't say was how dangerous the journey would be. Quinn's men knew this area better than Jack liked, and traveling through Comanche territory was risky for a white man, even one bringing home the chief's daughter. As they finished packing, Jack heard horses in the distance. He moved to the window and looked out. In the moonlight, he could see several riders coming down the valley toward his cabin. "They found us," Jack said. He handed Morning Fawn a knife. "Take this. We need to go out the back." Morning Fawn took the knife and nodded. Her face showed no fear, only determination. Jack grabbed his rifle and saddlebags. They slipped out the back door of the cabin just as the riders entered the clearing in front. Jack led Morning Fawn into the trees behind the cabin. They moved as quietly as they could through the darkness, heading for the place where Jack had hidden Penny earlier that evening. Behind them, they heard men shouting and the sound of the cabin door being kicked open. Jack knew they had only minutes before Quinn and his men realized they were gone and started tracking them. The night had just gotten a lot longer. Jack and Morning Fawn moved quickly through the dark forest. Behind them, they could hear Quinn's men searching the cabin and barn. Angry shouts told them the outlaws had discovered they were gone. "This way," Jack whispered. He led Morning Fawn up a steep hill covered with pine trees. The ground was rocky and hard. It would be difficult for the outlaws to find their tracks. They reached the top of the hill where Jack had hidden Penny earlier. The horse stood quietly, tied to a tree. Jack helped Morning Fawn climb up, then mounted behind her. He guided Penny down the other side of the hill, away from the cabin. They rode through the night, staying off the trails. Jack knew these woods well. He had spent 5 years hunting and trapping here. Every stream, every ridge was familiar to him. Dawn was breaking when they stopped to rest by a small creek. Penny needed water, and they both needed to eat. Jack helped Morning Fawn down from the horse. "We rest here," he said. "Only for a little while." Morning Fawn nodded. She looked tired but alert. She drank from the creek, then took some dried meat from Jack's saddlebag. They ate quickly, listening for any sound of pursuit. "Quinn men know these woods?" Morning Fawn asked. Jack shook his head. "Not like I do, but they're good trackers." "Morning," Fawn pointed west. "My people 2 days that way. We go there?" Jack considered their options. Quinn's men were behind them. Ahead was Comanche territory. Going back to town was too dangerous. "Yes," he said. "We go to your people." They mounted Penny again and continued west. The day grew warmer as the sun rose higher. Jack kept them moving, stopping only when necessary. By midday, they had traveled far from Jack's cabin. They were crossing a wide meadow when Jack heard horses. He pulled Penny to a stop and listened. The sound came from ahead of them, not behind. "Someone's coming," he said. "Not Quinn's men." They turned toward a stand of trees at the edge of the meadow. Jack dismounted and helped Morning Fawn down. They led Penny into the trees and waited. A group of riders appeared on the far side of the meadow. They weren't outlaws. Jack recognized Marshal Frank Porter and several men from town. Among them was Reverend Samuel Woods and Judge William Harrison. "It's people from my town," Jack told Morning Fawn. "Wait here." Jack stepped out of the trees and waved to get their attention. The riders saw him and turned their horses toward him. "Jack Bennett," Marshal Porter called as they approached. "We've been looking for you." Jack waited until they reached him. "What brings you all the way out here, Marshal?" Marshal Porter climbed down from his horse. He was a tall man with a gray mustache and serious eyes. "Those men who came to town, asking about you, they said you stole something from them." "They're outlaws," Jack said. "Name of Silas Quinn and his gang. They took a Comanche girl, daughter of Chief Running Bear. I helped her escape." The men from town exchanged worried looks. Reverend Woods, a thin man with a black coat, spoke up. "Where is this girl now?" Jack hesitated, then called over his shoulder. "Morning Fawn, it's all right." Morning Fawn stepped out of the trees, watching the town men carefully. She stood close to Jack, her hand resting on the knife he had given her. Judge Harrison frowned. His round face turned red. "You've been alone with this Indian girl? Unchaperoned?" "I saved her from Quinn and his men," Jack explained. "I'm taking her back to her people." Edith Montgomery pushed her way forward. She was a stout woman with sharp eyes who seemed to know everyone's business in town. "Look at her," she said. "Wearing his shirt, living in his cabin. It's a scandal." Jack realized Morning Fawn was still wearing one of his old shirts over her dress. He had given it to her a day. The cabin when the nights were cold. "It's not what you think," Jack started to say, but Reverend Woods cut him off. "This is most improper, Mr. Bennett. Most improper indeed. This young woman's reputation is compromised." Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. "She was captured by outlaws. I helped her escape." Marshal Porter looked uncomfortable. "Quinn's men rode into town claiming you stole this girl from them. Now we find you alone with her, miles from anywhere. It doesn't look good, Jack." "And what of the Comanche?" Judge Harrison added. "If Chief Running Bear learns his daughter was living alone with a white man, he might attack the town in revenge." "We were only at my cabin one night," Jack protested. "We're on our way to her people now." Reverend Woods shook his head sadly. One night is enough to ruin a woman's reputation, even an Indian woman. The town men gathered in a circle to talk among themselves. Jack could hear them arguing about what to do. Morning Fawn stood beside him, not understanding all their words, but sensing the trouble. "What they say?" she asked quietly. "They're worried," Jack told her. "They think your father will be angry that you stayed at my cabin." Morning Fawn's eyes flashed. "My father, thank you for saving me." "I hope so," Jack said. The town men ended their discussion and turned back to Jack and Morning Fawn. Judge Harrison stepped forward looking very serious. "We've reached a decision," he said. "To protect the town from Indian attack and to preserve this young woman's honor, you must marry her, Mr. Bennett." Jack stared at them in shock. "Marry her? That's crazy. I'm taking her back to her people." "It's the only proper solution," Reverend Woods insisted. "Then you can both go to her tribe as husband and wife. No dishonor will have occurred. I won't do it," Jack said firmly. Marshal Porter put his hand on his gun. "I'm afraid we must insist, Jack, for the safety of the town." Jack looked at the determined faces of the town men. Then he looked at Morning Fawn, who was watching them, all with confusion and growing anger. "They want us to marry," he explained to her. "They think it will stop your father from attacking the town." Morning Fawn's eyes widened. "Marry? Like white man and woman?" "Yes," Jack said. "But we don't have to. We can still go to your people." Morning Fawn looked at the town men, then back at Jack. "They let us go after Mary?" Jack nodded. "I think so." Morning Fawn thought for a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders. "We do? Then go to my father. He understand?" Jack wasn't sure. But he could see the town men were not going to let them leave otherwise. And if Quinn and his gang found them while they were arguing, they would all be in danger. "All right," he said reluctantly. "We'll do it your way." Reverend Woods smiled, broadly. "Excellent. We'll perform the ceremony right here. Judge Harrison can make it legal." And so, in a clearing in the forest with birds singing in the trees and a group of nervous townspeople as witnesses, Jack Bennett found himself married to Morning Fawn, daughter of a Comanche chief. The ceremony was brief, with Morning Fawn repeating the English words as best she could. When it was done, Judge Harrison wrote something on a paper and handed it to Jack. "Your marriage certificate," he said. "Make sure her father sees it." Jack put the paper in his pocket, feeling like he had just made either the biggest mistake of his life or somehow done the right thing for the wrong reasons. He looked at Morning Fawn, now officially his wife according to white man's law, and wondered what would happen when they reached her people. The town people left Jack and Morning Fawn after the wedding. Marshal Porter had wanted them to return to town, but Jack refused. He still planned to take Morning Fawn to her people. "Be careful, Bennett," Marshal Porter warned before they rode away. Chief Running Bear might not be happy about this marriage. Jack watched them go, then turned to Morning Fawn. "Ready to continue?" She nodded. Her face was hard to read. Jack wondered what she was thinking about the strange wedding. He helped her onto Penny, and they set off again toward Comanche territory. They rode in silence for a while. The sun was low in the sky when Jack spoke again. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "The wedding. It wasn't what I planned." Morning Fawn looked at him. "White man ways strange," she said. "Comanche different. Father arranged marriage for me with Strong Wolf from other band." Jack felt a chill. "You were to marry someone else?" "Yes. To join bands together." Morning Fawn touched the marriage paper in Jack's pocket. "This paper mean nothing to Comanche." Jack wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. "What will your father do when we get there?" Morning Fawn was quiet for a moment. "You saved me from bad men." He listened. Maybe he understand. They made camp that night by a small stream. Jack built a fire while Morning Fawn gathered berries and roots she found nearby. They ate a simple meal of dried meat and the berries. The night was cool, and they sat close to the fire. "Tell me about your people," Jack said. Morning Fawn smiled for the first time since the wedding. She told him about the Comanche camps, about hunting buffalo, about the dances and stories of her tribe. Her English was limited, but Jack listened carefully and asked questions when he didn't understand. In turn, Jack told her about his life, before the war, growing up on a small farm in Ohio. He told her about his parents who died while he was fighting, and his decision not to go back after the war ended. "Why you live alone?" Morning Fawn asked. Jack stared into the fire. "The war changed me," he said simply. "I saw too much. Did too much." Morning Fawn seemed to understand. She put her hand on his arm. "Past is past," she said. "New day comes." Jack looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. In the firelight, he could see strength in her eyes, and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. They slept on opposite sides of the fire that night. Jack took the first watch, alert for any sign of Quinn and his men. When Morning Fawn woke to take her turn, Jack found it hard to sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the wedding, to what would happen when they reached her tribe, to the look in her eyes across the fire. At dawn, they continued their journey. The land was changing, becoming more open as they moved west. Jack knew they were getting closer to Comanche territory. He felt both relief and worry. Soon Morning Fawn would be home. But what would happen to him then? By midday, they saw smoke from fires in the distance. Morning Fawn pointed. "My people," she said. Her face showed her excitement. Jack slowed Penny to a walk. "Will they shoot first and ask questions later?" Morning Fawn understood his worry. "I go first," she said. "Tell them you friend. Wait here." Jack helped her down from the horse. Morning Fawn strode forward, moving quickly despite her still healing ankle. She walked toward the distant smoke with her head high. Jack waited, holding Penny's reins tightly. He watched Morning Fawn grow smaller in the distance. His hand rested on his rifle, though he knew it would do little good if the Comanche decided to attack. He had been waiting about an hour when he saw riders coming toward him. Morning Fawn was with them, sitting behind a warrior on his horse. There were 5 Comanche men, all armed with bows and rifles. Jack stayed where he was, keeping his hands visible. The rider stopped a short distance away. Morning Fawn slid down from the horse and walked to Jack. "My father want meet you," she said. "You come, no weapon." Jack hesitated, then nodded. He took his rifle from its scabbard and handed it to her. He kept his knife, and she didn't ask for it. Jack dismounted and walked beside Morning Fawn toward the waiting warriors. One of the men was older than the others, with streaks of gray in his long hair. He wore a necklace of bear claws and had paint on his face. Jack guessed this was Chief Running Bear. Morning Fawn spoke to the chief in their language. She pointed to Jack several times. The chief listened, his face showing no emotion. Then he spoke to the other warriors. 2 of them moved their horses closer to Jack. "You come to camp," Morning Fawn told Jack. "Father want talk." The warriors escorted them to the Comanche camp. It was larger than Jack expected, with many teepees set up in a wide circle. Women stopped their work to watch as Jack rode in. Children ran alongside, curious about the white man. They stopped in the center of the camp. The chief dismounted and went into the largest teepee. The warriors motioned for Jack to wait. "What's happening?" Jack asked Morning Fawn quietly. "Council, meet," she said. "Decide what do with you." Jack didn't like the sound of that. "And with you? You're home now." Morning Fawn's face showed worry for the first time. "I was to marry Strong Wolf. Now I return with white husband." She touched the marriage paper Jack still carried. "This changed things." Before Jack could reply, a warrior came to lead Morning Fawn away. She went without protest, looking back at Jack once before disappearing into a teepee. Jack was left standing alone in the center of the camp, surrounded by curious and suspicious Comanche. He wondered if he would leave this place alive. After what seemed like hours, Jack was brought into the chief's teepee. Running Bear sat on a pile of furs. Several older warriors sat with him. Morning Fawn was there too, sitting to her father's right. The chief spoke, and Morning Fawn translated. My father thank you for saving me from bad white men, she said. He asked why you bring me here as your wife. Jack told his story with Morning Fawn translating. He explained about finding her with Quinn's men, the rescue, the night at his cabin, and the town people forcing them to marry. He showed them the marriage paper, which Running Bear examined with interest. I never planned to marry your daughter, Jack finished. I only wanted to bring her home safely. When Morning Fawn translated this, one of the older warriors spoke, angrily. Running Bear raised his hand for silence. My father say you are brave man, Morning Fawn told Jack, but there is problem. Strong Wolf come tomorrow for marriage. What happened now? Jack looked at Morning Fawn. In the days they had traveled together, something had changed between them. He had begun to care for this proud, clever woman. But he knew her place was here with her people. Tell your father I will go, Jack said. The marriage can be ended in white man's law. You can still marry Strong Wolf. Morning Fawn's eyes widened slightly as she translated his words. The chief and his council talked among themselves for a long time. Finally, Running Bear spoke directly to Jack. My father say you stay tonight, Morning Fawn translated. Tomorrow Strong Wolf come, then we decide. Jack was led to a small teepee at the edge of the camp. A warrior stood guard outside. Jack sat on a buffalo robe, wondering what would happen when Strong Wolf arrived. He touched the empty space where his rifle should be and hoped Morning Fawn would be all right. Jack woke to the sound of horses and shouting. He stepped outside the small teepee to see riders entering the camp. At their head was a tall warrior with a face painted for war. This had to be Strong Wolf, coming to claim his bride. The guard by Jack's teepee watched him closely but did not stop him from looking. Jack counted 8 warriors with Strong Wolf. They wore feathers and carried weapons. Their horses were painted with symbols Jack did not understand. Strong Wolf dismounted and strode to the chief's teepee. His face was proud and angry. He did not look at Jack, but some of his warriors did. Their eyes were cold. Morning Fawn appeared from a nearby teepee. She had changed into a dress decorated with beads and shells. Her hair was braided with feathers. She walked to her father's teepee and went inside. Jack wished he could hear what was being said. He sat down outside his teepee and waited. The camp was quiet except for the voices from the chief's teepee. Sometimes he could hear Strong Wolf's angry voice rising above the others. After about an hour, a warrior came for Jack. You come, he said in broken English. Jack followed him to the chief's teepee. Inside, Running Bear sat with the council of older warriors. Morning Fawn sat beside her father. Strong Wolf stood with his arms crossed, glaring at Jack. Running Bear spoke and Morning Fawn translated. My father say Strong Wolf angry. Say you steal his bride. Strong Wolf spoke again, pointing at Jack. His words sounded like threats. He say you must die for this dishonor, Morning Fawn explained. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed worry. Jack looked at Strong Wolf. The warrior was younger than him, strong and proud. Jack knew he would not win in a fight against him. Tell your father I did not come here to cause trouble, Jack said. I only wanted to bring you home safely, Morning Fawn translated. Running Bear listened, then spoke to Strong Wolf. The younger warrior shook his head and said something short and angry. He pointed to the marriage paper that lay on a blanket before the chief. One of the older warriors spoke up. Morning Fawn listened, then turned to Jack. Uncle Gray Fox asked if you are, brave man, will you fight for your wife? Jack was surprised. Fight? Against Strong Wolf? Morning Fawn nodded. Comanche way. 2 men fight for woman. Jack looked at Strong Wolf again. The warrior smiled now, confident he would win. Jack knew this was a fight he would likely lose. But he thought of Morning Fawn, of the days they had traveled together, of the way she had looked at him across the fire. Something had grown between them, something he was not ready to give up. I will fight, Jack said. Morning Fawn's eyes widened, but she translated his words. Strong Wolf laughed and said something to his warriors. They laughed too. Running Bear raised his hand for silence. He spoke, and Morning Fawn translated. Fight at sunset, winner takes woman as wife. Loser leaves or dies. Jack was taken back to his teepee. A young boy brought him food and water, but no one else came to see him. He sat alone, thinking about the coming fight and what it meant. As the sun began to set, Jack heard drums. The guard called him outside. The whole tribe had gathered in a large circle in the center of the camp. Running Bear stood at one side with Morning Fawn and the council. Strong Wolf stood opposite, his chest bare, his face painted with black and red lines. Jack was led to the circle. An old warrior took his shirt and handed him a knife similar to Strong Wolf's. The rules were explained through a warrior who spoke some English. The fight would continue until one man could not fight anymore or gave up. The drums beat faster. Jack and Strong Wolf circled each other. The Comanche warrior was quick and skilled with his knife. He made several cuts on Jack's arms. Jack defended himself as best he could, looking for an opening. Strong Wolf spoke as they fought, taunting Jack in his language. Jack stayed quiet, focusing on the fight. He had been in fights during the war. He knew patience could win when strength could not. The fight went on for what seemed like hours. Jack was bleeding from several cuts. Strong Wolf also had cuts, but seemed less tired. The warrior pressed forward, confident now that he would win. Then Jack heard a sound he recognized. Horses approaching fast. The tribe heard it too. Warriors reached for weapons. The fight stopped as everyone looked toward the camp entrance. Riders burst into the camp, firing guns into the air. Jack saw Silas Quinn at their head. The outlaw had found them. "There she is!" Quinn shouted, pointing at Morning Fawn. "Get her!" The camp erupted in chaos. Warriors ran for weapons. Women grabbed children and pulled them to safety. Quinn's men fired their guns, aiming at anyone who resisted. Strong Wolf ran to get his bow. Jack looked for Morning Fawn. She was with her father, who was trying to lead her to safety. Quinn saw them too. He turned his horse and rode straight for them. Jack ran forward, still holding his knife. He intercepted Quinn's horse, grabbing the reins and pulling hard. The horse reared up and Quinn struggled to stay in the saddle. "You!" Quinn yelled when he saw Jack. "You cost me a lot of money, Bennett." Quinn pulled his gun and aimed at Jack. Before he could fire, an arrow struck his arm. Strong Wolf had shot him from across the camp. Quinn screamed in pain and dropped his gun. Jack pulled Quinn from his horse and threw him to the ground. Quinn tried to reach for a knife at his belt, but Jack was faster. He held his knife to Quinn's throat. "Tell your men to drop their weapons," Jack said. "Or you die now." Quinn saw the look in Jack's eyes and knew he meant it. "Stop shooting!" he yelled to his men. "Put your guns down." The outlaws looked confused, but when they saw their leader on the ground with a knife at his throat, they lowered their weapons. Comanche warriors quickly surrounded them. Running Bear walked forward with Morning Fawn beside him. The chief looked at Jack holding Quinn, then at Strong Wolf, who stood nearby with his bow ready. He spoke to both men. Morning Fawn translated. "My father says you both fought well to protect our people." Strong Wolf said something to the chief. He looked at Morning Fawn, then at Jack, and touched his chest where Jack had cut him during their fight. He nodded once to Jack, a gesture of respect. "Strong Wolf says you fought with honor," Morning Fawn told Jack. "He does not claim me as wife." Jack was surprised. "What does that mean?" Morning Fawn smiled. "It means I choose. Comanche woman can choose if two men equal." She walked to Jack and stood beside him. Quinn, still on the ground, cursed. "The girl is worth money," he said. "Her father will pay to get her back." Running Bear understood enough English to know what Quinn said. The chief's face darkened with anger. He spoke to his warriors, who took Quinn and his men away. Morning Fawn looked at Jack's cuts from the fight. "You hurt," she said. "I'll heal," Jack told her. He looked at Running Bear. "What happens now?" Morning Fawn spoke to her father. The chief answered, looking thoughtfully at Jack. "My father says Quinn men will face Comanche justice," she translated. "And you have proven yourself, brave warrior." She paused, then added, "He asks if white man law of marriage is strong in your heart." Jack thought about the paper, the ceremony in the forest, and the days since then. He looked at Morning Fawn. "It's not the paper that matters to me," he said. "It's you." When she translated this, Running Bear nodded slowly. He spoke again. "My father says you may stay with tribe if you wish," Morning Fawn said. "Learn Comanche ways. Be my husband in both worlds." Jack looked around at the camp, at the people watching him. He thought of his cabin in the woods, of his lonely life there. Then he looked at Morning Fawn, and he knew his answer. "Tell your father I would be honored," he said. Morning Fawn's smile was like the sunrise. She took his hand as Running Bear raised his arms and spoke to the tribe. There were cheers and calls from the Comanche. "He tells them you are now Comanche," Morning Fawn said. "We feast tonight." Jack squeezed her hand. The path ahead would not be easy. He would have to learn a new way of life, a new language, new customs. But for the first time since the war, he felt like he had found a place where he belonged, and someone to belong with. "I'm ready," he said.